Hey, crypto heads! It's the Goose with the Cryptic Paranormal Show. Hello, you guys know I've been promoting this show quite a bit this week. I'm super excited about our guests. Real quick, Heisenberg, Denise, you guys doing okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, good,
Great.
good. But we
Fantastic.
only have an hour with the gentleman of the hour. Like I said, super excited to introduce him, the Professor Paranormal, Mr. Lloyd Auerbach, um, parapsychologist, author, lecturer, professor, just to name a few things. I couldn't remember the whole list of accolades and things that you're into in this
We
field,
only
but
have an
I can
hour.
tell you, you're right. I can tell you, I'm a fan. My first, like I was telling you in the messaging you the first, this was like my Bible when I got into the field, ghost hunting, how to investigate the paranormal by you, sir. And I want to thank you for your help getting this
Of
all
course.
started for me. But like we always like to start the show with kind of getting our guest origin story. How did this whole journey start for you? What got you into this field?
Well, unlike a lot of folks, it's mainly when I say television and comic books and science fiction, it's nothing to do with paranormal stuff for the most part. My
Okay.
dad worked for my dad worked for NBC. I had a TV set in my room when I was a little older than 2 years old, so I am a product of the television world in many respects. I started watching even when I was probably 4 years old, shows like Topper, which was about ghosts, and even the Twilight Zone and One Step Beyond. I just wasn't, all
Yeah.
the monster movies didn't bother me. But it was Dark Shadows and Star Trek that got me really looking into the question of whether there was anything to any psychic experiences.
Hmm.
Um, I was a bit of a science geek as a kid, as well as interested in comic books and mythology. But it was going to the library when I was probably about 12 or 13 and finding books on the same shelves, unfortunately, as vampires, werewolves, and witchcraft, um, about parapsychology, the science. And I just
Right.
grabbed those and started reading them, J.B. Ryan and others. I was very fortunate. I met New York area parapsychologists when I was a teenager. We actually had a parapsychology club I started in my high school.
Oh, nice.
And I just had a lot of things fall into place time wise and just knew that I wanted to get into the field
Yeah.
originally.
So, how did you go on to study that? Because that's not something most of us would know how to even get into that field.
Right. Well, the I did write to JB Ryan and also asked the couple of parapsychologists met in New York how I become a parapsychologist. What can I study? And at that time, there were no course. I mean, there were a few universities around the United States that had like one course,
Hmm.
um, but there were no programs whatsoever. No academic programs, no bachelor's or master's programs or anything like that. So the advice I got was to study some science, either social science like psychology or anthropology,
Sure.
sociology, or physical science. It was okay, pretty much anything that gives you a good grounding in science in some way, shape, or form, physical or social science. I actually started out in astrophysics at Northwestern under J. Allen Hynek, who was
Oh,
the UFO.
wow.
Yeah, so
Very
I
cool.
got to
Yeah.
spend time at the Center for UFO Studies. I really don't
Nice.
do anything with UFOs, haven't for decades, but at that point I was. And I lucked out. After that 1 year in astrophysics, I realized the math was going to kill me. So I switched to anthropology, along with a couple of my buddies who were also in astronomy. And as it happens, Northwestern had a great department, had many courses looking at magic and supernatural beliefs around the world. We had a history
Wow.
department that taught courses in the history of European and American witchcraft and the occult. So I was getting it in a lot of different ways. And then that was going to be great grounding. And it really has been incredible grounding for me
Yeah.
in what I've done. And then, as it happens, Mundelein College, which is in Chicago, there was a parapsychologist named John Bisaha who was doing a like after hours mini course, 6 week
Okay.
course. And I met someone from the Institute for Parapsychology, which today is the Ryan Research Center, who told me that they were just started a new master's program at John F. Kennedy University in California.
Nice.
So after college, I took a year off, but during that year, I applied to JFK, came out, got my master's in parapsychology, the
Wow.
program, and then went back to New York, worked for the American Society for Psychical Research, and then came back to California after a couple of years to teach at JFK and be on the faculty there in the program. Unfortunately, the parapsychology program, for political and financial reasons, ended
Oh
around
no.
87. And these days, JFK is really National University, has no parapsychology whatsoever. The ASPR doesn't even exist. So,
Oh geez. Okay.
personally.
So if somebody's looking into maybe getting into the parapsychology field on the level that you are currently in, how would they go about that?
So, well, first of all, let me say that the field is really open to people from other fields. I mean, the
Mhm.
Parapsychological Association is probably at least a third to a half people who have degrees in psychology. Not even,
Okay.
because very few have degrees in parapsychology. There are almost no degrees like that. The UK now does have, and has for years, some master's programs at schools like the University of Northampton. It's either called parapsychology or anomalous psychology. There are PhDs in parapsychology from the University of Edinburgh.
Wow.
But for anybody who wants to get into it, the first thing I'd say is take courses, besides reading good, credible sources in parapsychology,
Hmm.
take courses from the Rhine Research Center. We have an education department. It's the Rhine Education Center, and we offer certificate programs in everything
Cool.
from laboratory studies to field investigation, kind of scientific paranormal investigations, and others. They
Hmm.
are, frankly, a lot cheaper than college courses. They're not
Oh,
accredited by a college. You're not going to get a
right.
degree, but that education will allow you to communicate easily with people in the field. And that's the way you get into the field, is by getting to know other people in parapsychology.
You mean it's not by like starting a YouTube channel and doing crazy shows or
I
sneaking
can
into
almost
places?
guarantee that I can almost guarantee most of my colleagues don't even know that the YouTube channels exist.
That's
I
wonderful.
mean, I have one too. I don't think they know that
Yeah.
mine exists. So,
Right. 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 Because I mean, we used to be talking about shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost
yeah.
Adventures, but
That's
now
what
it's
they
kind of
think want you to think. They're out there watching.
right. Right. Now
Right.
it's all kind of like underground. It's all the YouTube, the
Well,
I don't know, the young kids,
I
but
just I remember meeting the few conferences I went to in the like 2000s, early 2010s. People were always walking up to me saying, "I'm making a TV pilot." It's like, sure you are. Um, and now they're making YouTube shows. So,
yeah. Hey,
they don't need a
I mean,
production company.
right. I mean, I've watched a few that
Right.
we love. Yeah, we wouldn't be with RU Media if we didn't love Resident Undead. So, but
Right.
Right.
uh, so I'm interested. When did you? So, was the fieldwork part of your like curriculum when you were doing your research, or is that something you were already doing before you started
No,
your
actually,
studying?
what my very first investigation actually happened my first semester at JFK in the master's program.
Oh, okay.
Actually, within about probably about 3 weeks in, because one of the courses, because of timing, one of the courses I hit that first semester of the 4 courses I took was a field investigations course, deeply looking at the history of that and actually doing
Okay.
investigations. And so the program was very well rounded. There was a lot of focus on research in the lab, and then there were courses looking at the evidence for life after death, for survival of bodily death, and then there were field investigation courses. So there were a few of those. We had people come in as guest lecturers or guest instructors. So Jeffrey Mishlove, who has New Thinking Aloud YouTube channel, which is a very popular one, and actually it was on PBS back in the 1980s.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
so it was actually there. But Jeffrey was one of my instructors. D. Scott Rogo, who was a well-experienced writer and investigator, came and lectured many times. I got to know him pretty well before he passed away. So we had people, other folks in parapsychology come to JFK because we were the only master's program that was
Sure.
out there.
Excellent. Did you have a question?
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like things have gone backwards. I feel like there was more available. I know you have the
Yeah.
institute, but like, I feel like things have gone backwards, and what we'd like to see is more programs
Right.
available and more,
Yeah.
more ways to educate people. But it seems like You had way more
Yeah,
opportunities.
I have to say,
I mean, I'm glad that you're providing
Yeah.
opportunities
Right.
to people, but
so back in the 70s, I'm that old. Um, the 70s were like a popular time. There was a lot of programming on TV that was, there was a show called In Search of, which is, it's on DVD. The original In Search of with Leonard Nimoy hosting covered everything in the unexplained. And honestly, it was like
Yes.
a mini documentary every week. It was incredibly well done,
yeah.
well
I love that
researched,
show.
terrific show. There was a lot more opportunity there. But educationally, again, when I worked at the ASBR in the early 80s, we had a course list of courses, good courses in parapsychology. There were about 100 universities that had a single course. A couple of them had two courses.
Wow.
But something else happened in the 70s, unfortunately, and that was the rise of the organized skeptics movement. Although we would call them pseudo-skeptics. The Committee for Scientific Investigations, the Claims of the Paranormal, James Randi, the amazing Randi, all that stuff happened. And they brought in some high power, big names, scientists and academics who were just very, very much against our field. And
Yeah.
they have made, it's changing. It has changed in the last few years, but they have made it in the 80s and 90s, they made it toxic for people in a college or university who to even say that they were interested in parapsychology. People, would get reprimanded actually sometimes if they made it known.
And the fact that you had a club at your high school, like
cool.
I find that amazing.
Well, and
I think
actually,
that's so cool. If you were to try to do that now.
No, actually, you could probably do it now. It just depends on you have to find teachers who are willing to support. So I had, as it happens, I had a physics teacher and an earth science teacher who were really, one of the physics teacher was from India. And he had experiences as a kid, and the earth science teacher was just interested. So they were supporting it. And then I was able to get a letter from J.B. Ryan written to support our club starting as well. And the principal thought, I remember the principal saying, okay, I got this letter. I don't know what the hell parapsychology is. Go ahead. I don't care.
Have fun.
Yeah,
kids.
it was pretty much
awesome.
it. It's like have fun, kids. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of some high schools like in the Cleveland area, and I think John Carroll actually has a paranormal club.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's really parapsychology or just kind of a more scientific based, just straight ghost hunting club, I'm not really sure. But I mean, there's very few. I mean, they've made it so easy for people just to go ghost hunting if that's what they want to do. So
the thing is that a high school may or may not approve a ghost hunting club if they're not going to do what they're doing on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Because then the school might have some responsibility if anything goes wrong. I mean, there's always those kind of issues. So, talking about investigation, talking about things might be, getting together. Our club, we didn't do any investigations. We did have guest lectures from these area parapsychologists. We made computer programs, primitive though they were, to test ESP and such. And we did a lot of internal stuff at the school. There were a lot of kids that were interested in it. My high school was a senior high that only had 600 students. Very tiny school in Westchester County, and I had 20 some. I think at one point we had 30 members of the club, which is a large percentage of the school.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, excellent.
That's super cool.
Yeah,
I think we should be more concerned about Mark Paul. He's been alive since 1883.
What's that? Oh.
How is that possible, Mark?
Yeah, there it is. Hello, greetings from Swanton, Ohio, west of Toledo since 1883. But yeah, I mean, I didn't understand this. The reason I started it because I was having activity in the house that we had moved into growing up, and again, we didn't have that. And honestly, my parents went to a church where you didn't talk about that kind of thing. It's you were either crazy or you were demonically possessed. I mean, those were the two options. So I kept it secret. So, and I went to those library stacks where like the vampire, the Wolverines, and then the parapsychology and ghost hunting class. Yeah. And I was just like, okay. So, and then I had to sneak them home and I was reading them under my blankets. Like most kids would read comic books with a flashlight. But, it's nice to know back in the day where they were a little bit more open-minded. Now it's more about the glitz and the glamour of the TV shows. And it's
right. And that it's unfortunate. I mean, we have to kind of fight against that sometimes in the education process
Right.
itself. I was fortunate. Again, my parents were my dad worked for television, so and my uncle
Yeah.
worked for television, and another uncle was a radio newscaster. So I come from a
Yeah.
very
Nice.
non-traditional career-based family. So
Yeah.
and my mom was interested in the subject, so I didn't have to hide it. I mean, they were helping
Yeah.
supporting me along the way as well.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
That's
definitely
awesome.
nice. That's definitely a big help. Now my parents are supportive, but
Yeah.
back then
Yeah.
it was a fight. But
Yeah, I'll also say that I grew up. The town I grew up in, or the high school, was in Elmsford, New York, and the next town
okay.
over is Perrytown,
Yeah.
which includes
Oh,
Sleepy Hollow. So
Oh, cool.
we
right.
had, we had the whole Revolutionary War thing, but we had a lot of ghost stories in the area, and they were all the legendary stuff. So to everybody, it was just okay, so we got a ghost, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I'm gonna go back to one of the chat room questions from Rebecca. Oh, sorry, I knew you were bringing it up, and I pushed it. So she's really interested in the work of Ian Stevenson. She would like to know who you would say is a person who modernly is carrying his work forward.
Well, the person who has carried his work forward for the last several years, many years, is Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies. He's just retiring. I can't recall. There's a couple people at the University of Virginia in that division that are going to be continuing that work, and of course, Jim will be continuing that to some extent. And then also more independent is an author and researcher named Jim Matlock, who has written a book on a really good, amazing book on reincarnation. In fact, Jim Tucker has written a couple of great books about children who remember previous lives. So they've been
Yes.
carrying
Yeah.
the torch for
Okay.
Stevenson.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that because we talk about the past lives regression and the stories of children who just seem to
Right.
know so much about people that actually existed in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, and we have to because past life regression is questionable on a lot of levels
Hmm.
because hypnosis itself is.
Sure.
The University of Virginia, the Stevenson and the folks that followed his process have focused specifically on little kids because they've not been contaminated by
Sure.
all
That
the
makes
Mhm.
sense.
information we have. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and I've heard some of the
Yeah.
cases have
And
turned up more of that the parents were kind of coaching
Yeah,
the children.
that's part of the
right.
process. You have to be really careful about that, especially in modern society.
Sure.
But there's some really amazing cases in a
There's a
variety of
place in
folks.
China, right? That like there was always like a reincarnation going on, like these people.
Yeah.
China. Well, the village. Never mind.
Were you going to bring something up?
Does Tucker do like seminars?
He's given lectures.
Does he
He's given
travel and do
lectures.
them?
Actually, there's plenty of links on if you just Google Division of Perceptual Studies. I think if you
Okay.
probably put in University of Virginia DOPS, DOPS, you'll probably get that too. Their website has links to tons of media and free publications of lots of information. That group actually does work on near-death experiences. They look at out-of-body experiences. They've done work on apparitions. They've done mediumship, things like that. They have a lot of material that's
Very cool.
available. And on the web, and I don't remember the exact title of it off the top of my head, there's a panel that they did with all of them talking about evidence for life after death. And the moderator is John Cleese.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Because he's very interested in their work.
Okay.
And
That's
I think you could
interesting to know.
probably put in just, into YouTube, Jim Tucker and John Cleese, and you'll probably get a short video of that too.
I'd have to check it
Cool.
out just to see John Cleese, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great moderator, I got to say. He's
right.
Can't think of anybody better than that.
Yeah. So somebody told me when I told them that we were having you on the show, I was supposed to ask you about the chocolate.
Okay. Well, yeah, I actually have a certificate as a professional chocolatier. And for a while, I got that in 2009. For a while, I was actually making and selling chocolate. I'm saving that now for retirement. That'll be my retirement business.
Yeah.
But I was doing it. But I do continue to do guided chocolate tasting events here in the Bay Area. Yeah.
Nice.
And that's something I've been doing
That's
since about 2005, actually, where I, give people different samples of different kinds of different chocolates from different chocolate makers, and talk about the chocolate maker and the process of making chocolate. And they all get to taste stuff. And I always have new favorites that I discover. That's the other thing I do. I'm always kind of trying new chocolates. And my current favorite is a company called Fortunato Chocolate. It's fortunatochocolate.com. And I got to say, they make amazing dark chocolate. I haven't tried their milk chocolate. But
Okay.
Dark chocolate is my favorite too.
yeah, the
Of
other
all
thing
the
to
chocolates.
well, that's what I eat is just dark chocolate.
Yeah.
But the other thing to do is there's a great website called barandcocoa.com. And they have, I mean, you may have sticker shock when you see some of the prices, because
Oh, sure.
artisan chocolate's more expensive,
Yeah.
but you don't eat a whole bar, so it's different.
True.
And
Yeah.
Bar and
Right.
Cocoa Bar and Cocoa brings in chocolate bars from all over the world, and all the companies they work with have sustainable processes. So they're always
Okay.
giving back
Nice.
and paying more money to the farmers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a great
Awesome.
site.
I know it's scrolling through some socials. I had seen this chocolate bar from Dubai trending everywhere.
Yeah, I see that too. I haven't tried that. It's a style of chocolate apparently with
Yeah.
pistachio and wafers and
Yeah.
things.
I mean,
Yeah,
it looks
I'm
great, but
curious. Really, it looks great. Yeah, I'm curious about trying. I haven't ordered any yet. I'm just happy with my dark chocolate.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
well, thank you for the little segue there. Now we'll
Yeah.
get back into the meat
Okay.
and potatoes.
Well,
I'm gonna
there
ask-
is. I should say there is a connection here too.
Okay.
Back in 2005, there was a paper published by Dean Radin. He had been asked to do some research on whether chocolate has some magical properties, and what he did was a research. He did one with chocolate and did it again with tea. That the idea that food made with love is better for us.
Mm-hmm.
So what he did was he did a controlled study, double-blind study with batches of chocolate from a Hawaiian chocolate company. In fact, they were actually paying for the study, and it was split into four batches, and then they got volunteers. Each of three batches had a different way of putting that message that this chocolate is better for you. It's going to give you more energy. It's going to lift your mood better. And then one sample was not touched. They had a Buddhist monk praying over it. They had a shaman from Mongolia do a ritual over it.
Oh,
and
wow.
then they had some device that an engineer put together, which supposedly recorded the Buddhist monks' intentions, and then they just simply played that in an isolation booth.
Wow.
And they had them all, the volunteers all separately do one of the samples without knowing which is which, and they each were told to have a half an ounce of chocolate at 10 a.m. and to eat it slowly, and a half an ounce of chocolate at 3 p.m. and fill out a survey each time about their mood and their energy level. So when the data was collected and the person who did not know anything about which sample went to who, there was a huge difference between those three samples that had the intention on it and the one that didn't. Huge.
I love it.
So one of the things Dean mentioned was makes you think about going to a fast food place where teenagers are making stuff and don't really care about their food.
Yeah.
So
I love it. I'm such a huge proponent for people really need to understand the power of their words and the power of their thoughts and all of that. So I love studies like that. There was the one where they were talking mean to plants and then they were talking nice to them, and the ones they talked nice to flourished and the other ones, shriveled up. There's even water, if you yell at it and then freeze it, it just looks terrible. But if you talk kindly to it, it looks like beautiful snowflakes when it freezes. I mean,
so
I 100% believe all
keep
of that.
In mind. Everybody watching who does ghost hunting should keep that in mind when talking to ghosts.
Exactly.
Yes,
we say that all the time.
I saw
We're human. We're all humans.
I saw your quote up front from Hans Holter. That is so appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was another Bible that I used to go to for reference. I'm going to ask another question for Rebecca on reincarnation, and then we're going to get some basic just education on what ghosts and hauntings are.
Okay.
So what do you think the most poignant conclusion is about reincarnation? Beyond proving its existence, does it then become an existential philosophical bottom line? That was hard to read, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca. That's a really good question. fact is that there are so many different interpretations from different religions and mythologies and cultural beliefs about what reincarnation is, and the rules of reincarnation can vary in terms of who can get reincarnated, all of that stuff. It changes all culturally all over the world. And of course, we don't have evidence that everybody gets reincarnated, because not every little kid is talking about these past life memories. So we know that something's going on. This is what exactly is happening. We don't know exactly. The one conclusion is this is a phenomena that rarely does happen. The question, and this is really a truly specific question for science, is it seems like consciousness is reborn into these people, these children, in very select instances. What does that say about consciousness? I mean, that's the question. What does it say about consciousness? Now, one of my colleagues who is a pure materialist and doesn't believe in life after death per se, he's fascinated by these cases of kids remembering previous lives, because he cannot think of, and he's a really broad philosophical and physics thinker, and he's very incredibly knowledgeable in parapsychology, and he can't figure any explanation for this at all. But the one thing he said is, I don't care what anybody says, they need to be studied. This should be a question for all of science, not just parapsychologists in general.
Right.
It's a phenomenon that people just dismiss without actually thinking about what's actually going on or looking into the cases. And I think the most poignant conclusion is this is happening. Nobody knows exactly what exactly is happening, but mainstream science very clearly doesn't care or doesn't want to look at it.
I have so many theories as to why.
Throw one out.
When I hear stories like that, like, it's very obvious that something happened to these children. They got their consciousness from somewhere, right? And I'm a firm believer that whoever they is, society, whatever, doesn't want us to understand any of this. That's why they put out these, things about how, people who do investigations are crazy, and that's, hogwash and all of that, because I feel like they don't want us to know that we can do things with our mind.
Well, I think you're right, but maybe not in the way you think. Since the 19th century, the development of science has been focused on a materialist philosophy. And materialism is dogma. I mean, essentially, most of these people are, let me step back, the so-called skeptics, the psychop people, most of those folks, we would not call them skeptics. They're not skeptical. They are disbelievers. They're disbelievers in anything that contradicts the materialist philosophy or their particular philosophy, just like people with a fundamentalist religious perspective, just like true believers in the New Age, believing everything. They just don't like anything that contradicts stuff. It is an emotional reaction more than it is some sort of conspiracy or something else. But what's interesting and happening for the last 10 years is there has been an upswing, and more people coming from the various sciences and philosophy looking at what David Chalmers called the hard question of science. What is consciousness? Parapsychology has been studying effects of consciousness directly, without anything else. We're the field that's been doing this for over 100 years. And when we're looking at what a ghost might be, for example, what are these apparition cases or reincarnation cases or near-death experiences, we are dealing with the root of what is consciousness. We still can't figure out what it is, but we're dealing with consciousness. And so there's always been this pushback, again, because of a almost devout scientist or scientism. It's almost like a religion for many of these folks.
That's true.
Which is why, if you have 3 people who see a ghost, what you usually hear from these folks is, it's mass hallucination. At which point, and when this has happened, when people said that to me, because I've done work with the USS Hornet, where there have been multiple witnesses of apparitions. My response is, show me the scientific research on mass hallucination, because there isn't any to speak of.
Right.
No. And I could see if it was like, maybe there was a chemical that was somehow put into the room and so everybody was
Yeah.
hallucinating, but the fact that all of them saw soldiers on the upper deck, that's not the way that works. One person would see a unicorn, one person would see their third grade
Right.
teacher. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
no
Yeah,
way.
that's right. Yeah. So it's, the thing that anyone who is dealing with any of this, even if you are not sure, and I think it's also important to say, we're not sure how this works. We're not sure. We don't know
Right.
what the force is that moves an object, for example.
Mhm.
We're not sure what a ghost is made out of, for that matter,
Right.
because we don't know what consciousness is. We just know that a ghost is consciousness. So that's all we know. So you have to push back and say, where's your research that says that's the explanation?
Right.
Gotcha.
And
That's
then the
true.
fact is that an individual case could have multiple explanations, and you might have investigated it and come up with a conclusion. And somebody says, "Well, that can't be right. It's got to be X, this, or this." It's like, have you looked at this
Mhm.
case? I mean, I've had people. I had a case years ago where this couple was calling around to every university they could think of. They didn't actually go to JFK, but they called around to this. They actually ended up talking to the local skeptics, the Bay Area skeptics. And every time they were funneled to the psych department at the universities and told to come in for psych testing, and the thing is that all four of them living in the house were experiencing the same thing. And when we got there, it turned out that every single one of the things they were experiencing had a normal explanation. It was unusual. It was structural. It was methane gas seeping up from the ground because the landfill's on
Right.
the other side, static electricity catching it on fire, low frequency sound. I mean, you name it, this family was experiencing all the stuff we think about.
Wow.
They never once, no one even said, I'll come out and check out your place,
Mhm.
until they got to me. And they got to me through the local police department.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So it's like, when people say that can't be, it's like, maybe it's not a ghost, but unless you go and check yourself, you can't say
Right.
it's mass hallucination or it's gullible
Right.
people. Yeah,
Right.
you can't do that.
Yeah. The mass hallucination one really got
What's
me.
up?
It
It
was
always
like,
gets me.
One
that
second.
doesn't even make sense logically.
One second.
What's up?
It's the village of Pingyang Village in China.
Okay.
Okay.
You found it.
There it is.
You found it.
Is that the one
Look
that has
that
lots of
up.
reincarnation or something like that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, now I can let it go.
Had
Okay.
to Google it. Good job. Good job. So you answered the question then basically of what a ghost is. It's a consciousness, which
It's
we don't really
consciousness without a
understand.
body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
So
that is different. That is different than a haunting or residual haunting. Because that is information in the environment. But the thing about both of those is that we have to use our ESP to pick that stuff up. So
okay.
it's not just about the
Right.
ghost appearing, it's about the fact that we are perceiving that ghost, the signal the ghost is putting out through a psychic means. So yeah, everybody's a little psychic in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. But there's people that will go their whole life without ever seeing
Right.
anything, and there's people who can't
Mhm.
walk from one room to another without
Right.
seeing
Whether they're
things.
picking up
So,
the information because it's too information overload, or whether it's an actual entity. Yeah, that's right.
right.
Interesting. So
Hmm.
how would you describe a residual haunting then? It's just
It
is it
seems
the
to be
repeat?
it seems to be information. Well, the model is that we're working off of is that everything kind of holds information. In fact, there's an ability that psychics often talk about called psychometry. It's actually
Mhm.
very easy to learn. I've taught students to do it, where you touch or hold an old object and you're picking up
Yeah.
information about its owner, its history, even if you can't see it, even if you can't directly touch it. Well, a house is just a big object. You're using
Yeah.
psychometry to
Yeah.
pick up stuff from the past. Some of the information, usually high emotion, whether it's negative or positive, is going to be kind of
Mhm.
louder or come to the forefront.
Mhm.
So people pick up emotion more than anything else. In fact,
Yeah.
everybody who's ever done house hunting or apartment hunting has probably experienced a haunting. Because if you've walked into a place and gotten a good vibe or a bad vibe, and it's not the
Uh-huh.
decor
Right.
and it's not a smell,
Yeah.
you have experienced a haunting. You've picked up on the emotions of the people who used to live there or live there
Okay.
still.
Good or
Yeah,
bad.
that's
Yeah.
that's a haunting.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. So if the people are actually living there and say they leave and you go in and you do your investigation, if they leave a vibe or an energy that you're picking up, that's considered a
Mhm.
haunting as well.
That's right. That's that's right. In fact, most people there's this idea that hauntings relate to dead people, but they don't. They actually were caused by living people. So the analogy I usually use is you can watch a movie from, let's say you watch Frankenstein from 1931. It's one of my favorite old movies.
Yeah.
Everybody in that movie is dead. Everybody.
Yeah.
But we can. I have a DVD of that. I can watch that whenever I want. And
yeah,
it's a recording. They were alive when they made it. They're dead now. But people also watched the movie for a long time when everybody in that movie was alive. So we have hauntings reported not only of the emotions that people are leaving while they're alive, but also even of picking up visual information or auditory information related to the living people too.
Wow.
So is that then what doppelgangers are?
Most likely,
just
yeah, that may be
movie?
There's a couple of ideas of what doppelgangers, it depends on the situation, but they may very well be that. In fact, I've had people call me and say that they got home after dark and they start turning on the lights, but they see a figure down the hallway before the light got turned on. The figure comes towards them, they recognize themselves, and then they freak out and leave the house because they're now totally freaked out that they saw themselves as a ghost. And
yeah, because according to the movies, that means they're going to die.
Well, that's
right?
a German, an old bit of
yourself.
German folklore is what that is. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
where the word doppelganger comes from. Nobody dies because they see themselves. Certainly not Gen Z. Yeah, because everybody's doing selfies, right? That's
Right.
Yes.
But maybe there are people who still are afraid of themselves on video, so that could actually cause some problems. So we have those things happening, and then the other thing is that's really interesting is, of course, we have haunted places like Gettysburg, the Gettysburg battlefield.
Yeah,
I talked to people back in mid 1980s when Ted Turner was shooting the Gettysburg miniseries for TNT. And they actually got Civil War reenactors to reenact the battle. So they were all extras except for a few actors. And I got a call at the universities back when we had our program from one of the extras, one of the reenactors who had collected stories from the other extras, the other actors who were reenactors, because they were camping out on the battlefield. They were allowed to be on the battlefield because of this. Turner got permission somehow. And they would wake up in the middle of the night to use the porta potty. He was collecting all these stories, and so they'd see men marching through their tents, and they'd hear gunfire and cannon fire and all that. And it was very similar type of stuff. And some of them actually tried to talk to the figures they saw. It was like they were in the middle of something, but that was not even noticing them. So then they realized they probably were seeing some sort of time loop or video loop, you might say, of the actual battle, which got them more excited than actually talking to the soldiers.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's a really tough one for me, because I really do. I pray that is residual, because the thought of like your consciousness, like reliving a traumatic thing like that
keep
for
in
eternity.
mind that not every one of those soldiers died at Gettysburg.
True.
I investigated a house for sightings back in 1991 or 92. One of the first sightings episodes. And the house, the couple buys this house near the airport in Portland, and they bought it knowing they got it real cheap because there had been a murder there.
Oh, geez.
Not too long before. And the woman was knifed to death, was stabbed to death, and the guy was in jail. The guy was in prison who did it. So it turns out, they felt really weird in this one spot. It did turn out the husband actually worked for airport security, so he did some checking, and it was the spot where the murder actually happened. They ignored it as much as possible, but they had occasionally had relatives over. And I think the first thing happened was a cousin was kind of taking a nap on the sofa, and the murder happened in the living room. And he wakes up hearing a scream, and he looks over and sees this woman being stabbed, and then it disappears when she died, when she clearly expires.
Oh my gosh.
So not a ghost because the guy's in prison.
Yeah.
So you can have these highly charged emotional events. They can also be positive events, but most people never report a positive haunting.
Sure. Right. People just seem to love it or gravitate towards the negative.
Well, I mean,
Well, it's also a lot. It's a lot easier to remember.
Sure. Well, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
if I just see a lady and she's in a Victorian dress and she looks beautiful and she's putting flowers into a
Right.
vase and then she disappears, my brain's going to be like, wow, that was weird, and then
Right.
forget about it. But if I see somebody get murdered in my living room, that's going to stick with me,
It is
and I'm
going
going
to
to
stick
talk
with you.
about it.
And the fact is that people,
Yeah.
you know, look at the news. It's always negative, right? They don't tell us good
Right.
news. You don't
Right.
call a plumber because your plumbing is working well.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
So you're not going to hear about
Yeah.
it too often.
Yeah. I remember. It's funny. We kind of correlated with that. We've had Andrea Perrin from the Conjuring House on a few times, and you know, of course, the movie focuses on the demonic, and you know, but she talks so much about how many great, beautiful experiences they had as far as the hauntings are concerned. So it's kind of a give or take, but it's nice to know that somebody still, with everything they dealt with, they still saw and witnessed all these like wonderful things
Right.
as far as hauntings are
Right.
concerned.
Right. Yeah, but the shows, you know, the
Right.
shows don't want to talk about that.
No.
No,
Yeah.
that's boring.
Yeah, fear is something that causes it lodges in our head and it lodges in our hearts in some respects. So
Sure.
Right.
it affects us a lot more than other things do.
It kind of.
I actually wanted to ask you, because I was watching an interview, I can't remember which one, and you were talking about how people do like the spoon
Yeah.
bending.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, you mean something like this?
look,
Oh, wow.
I made this so I could practice.
Okay, that's a tie wheel. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, we were just talking about, you know, the movies and the media and all that stuff. So when you're doing stuff like that, you say that it's better to be relaxed, like you have more power to do that sort of thing when you're not like bend.
Well,
bend,
there
right?
is yelling at the spoons, but it should be in a party atmosphere and actually doing psychokinesis. The interesting thing is most pop culture imagery shows people like until a vein starts popping on your head, right? But the reality is if you were to watch people doing it, there's a total calm that comes over them. It's almost like they're not feeling any emotion at all. I like to say that they become a Vulcan like Mr. Spock.
Nice. Like that.
Okay.
And it's just, and even with the spoon bending, when you can kind of tell by watching people's faces, they're laughing one moment and then they're kind of twisting the spoons like this without even an emotion at all. And typically if they're laughing when they're bending it, they're putting pressure on the spoons. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
That was super interesting to me, and again, everything's a conspiracy theory to me. But the media and the shows and everything, I just feel like everything is so pushed towards us, like always being in fear, always being overstimulated, always being caffeinated, always,
Because
chemicals.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Why are the shows on? I mean, it's for ratings. They have to,
right.
They're selling something for a sponsor.
Sure.
And that's why the shows go in that direction. I mean, it has, and part of it also, I think, is that for a lot of the shows are afraid, the networks are afraid to take a chance. They're more willing to do something like something else that's been done that clearly gets ratings than taking a chance on paying for a show that might do well, but it's not enough like the other shows. So it's always a gamble for them, and not all these executives are willing to do that gamble, unfortunately. There was a show on reincarnation. Actually, it was a 6-episode show, which really, the executive producer, her son was one of the kids that remembered a previous life. That's how she got the idea to do this. And she went to A&E, and they were doing the show. And I can't recall what her title of the show was, but A&E gave her a title and said, here's the title of your show. You're going to use this. And the title was, and the reasoning for the title, I'll tell you in a second, was Ghosts Inside My Child.
Oh my God.
And the reasoning was, there's all these ghost hunters out there. They're going to watch this show and they're going to love the show, but we have to let them know it has something to do with ghosts. And she said, well, it doesn't have anything to do with ghosts.
Right.
And she argued that, rightly so, that there's a bigger audience who was interested in reincarnation. Right. And what happened was some people who are interested in ghosts watch the first episode. If they even made it past 15 minutes, I'd be surprised. Unless they were interested in reincarnation, that show had nothing to do with ghosts or ghost hunting or anything else, and it just failed. So it is about money for them. It's not about, that is a conspiracy of sorts, but it's really it really is totally about money.
I did see like Josh Gates did a mini series about the afterlife. It was like a 3 or 4 episode series, but it wasn't like your typical just like it wasn't like a ghost hunting show. It was like he went through how people handled the afterlife, from like their memorial service to like past life regression, ghosts. I mean, he had all kinds of specialists in like archaeology and all these things to kind of explain the afterlife, and they got into reincarnation and the past life thing, and it was interesting because it came from it more as a scientific kind of a psychological explanation than the ghost hunting and the it was interesting.
I didn't know about that. We'll have to look that one up. There was a show on Netflix, is still on there, called Surviving Death, which is based on
my bad.
Yeah.
Josh Gates did a show kind of like that, but no, Surviving Death that's the one I'm talking
about.
Yeah.
So that was a good show, and that the book itself, called Surviving Death by Leslie Kean, Kean, great book. It got great ratings, a lot of viewers, but Netflix, for whatever reason, decided not to go on with another season of that. So there have been things done every once in a while, but somebody like a Josh Gates could do something because he's already proven himself with these other shows.
And he's got the automatic ratings, so they might pick it up.
Because... So someone who's already in that situation could do something and get the network, get someone to show it. But then if it didn't do well or as well as his other show, it wouldn't continue.
Right.
Yeah. And nobody would ever pick it up, because if Josh Gates can't do it, nobody's going to be able to do it. So there would never be anything similar.
Right.
It's a problem.
So, I want to kind of go back to the short discussion on PK, because and also kind of aligning with the German their German folklore, and because we know poltergeist is kind of a Germanic term. And there is a tie-in there with PK and PKE.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
So Darren PK, also wanted to know to explain that so he understands it, because there's so many people with so many different ideas of what it could be.
So simply put, PK, psychokinesis. Psychokinesis means movement or action by the mind. And that is action by someone's mind, living or dead. So an apparition has a consciousness, has a mind, affecting the physical world. That runs the range from moving an object to affecting equipment. We do a lot of testing with human beings affecting devices. It includes healing possibilities, bending metal, just a wide range of, even EVP is, if there's true EVP, it is because of PK, because of psychokinesis. All right, so that's what's all going on. It is PK if it's an apparition, a ghost doing it, or if it's a living person doing it. Either way, that's PK. All right. So one thing about psychokinesis is that we have evidence of what's called micro PK. People can affect the insides of devices, make things non-random. In fact, we have a huge amount of data on using random systems and someone affecting the random system. And I want you to keep in mind that a lot of the so-called spirit boxes work off supposedly random systems. So you don't need a ghost affecting that. It could be you affecting that. That's an unconscious effect. If nothing physical happens in the environment, there's no PK. I mean, unless you want to count this as PK, because my mind makes my hand move.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. So hopefully, we don't know what the motive force is, because honestly, even internally, we call PK the trickster phenomenon. Sometimes it's electrostatic. Sometimes if there's a temperature change that needs to happen, it could be that. Depending on what's moving, it could be affecting airflow. It could be affecting something else, which affects something else, which affects something else. So there are any number of possible motive forces. We don't know exactly how this works, partly because we haven't been able to capture lightning in a bottle, so to speak. Poltergeist phenomena, those are cases in which the activity is almost exclusively physical, like totally physical.
Right.
No apparitions, no indication. In fact, I've taken mediums to poltergeist cases, and they're like, "Yeah, there's no spirits here."
Yeah.
You know? So it's totally physical. Now, that term is used actually in the United Kingdom differently. If there's anything physical that happens, they call it a poltergeist, and then they figure out who's causing it. Is it a living person, or is it a dead person? Okay.
Yeah.
We look at a poltergeist case as it's coming from a living individual, and we have to play detective to determine whose unconscious mind is causing this action. And it's usually because of stress, something psychological, something at the root of that. And we all probably have had some kind of mini poltergeist event when you're really stressed and frustrated. One of your devices starts screwing up, like your printer or your computer.
Yeah.
That's still the same thing.
And the more frustrated you get, the more things happen.
And that is
and
PK.
then your keychain gets stuck on your doorknob, and all this crazy stuff happens.
Yeah, I had in a couple instances, I had a TV go on and stay on for 5 minutes without being plugged in, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But
I believe it. Yeah.
You know, that was because I was really frustrated with something. And then I also had a stereo, same thing. Yeah. I mean, if we could harness that, we wouldn't need solar or anything else, right?
Right.
But I mean, and for the people who are like, there's no way. When somebody is angry or very sad or something like that, you can feel their energy when they walk into the room.
That's right.
You can feel that something is wrong. So I 100% believe that when I am super angry, it is going to mess up my printer or turn on my TV or, you know, make my phone drop calls or whatever. And that's why I always tell my kids, just breathe, you know, just get yourself back to normal, because it's just going to keep getting worse.
Yeah. In fact, I had a computer issue in the 80s, and I called tech support. And when I explained what was happening, the guy's like, "Yeah, that can't happen." It was a software issue. And he said to me, "How are you feeling right now? Besides, you know, pissed off that you had to call me." And I explained what was going on. And he said, "Okay, I want you to turn off your computer, take a walk around the block, breathe, and come back." And we ended up, I said, "Why are you telling me this?" He said, "Well, we kind of know that mood kind of affects things." So then I explained who I was, and we had an hour and a half conversation about other issues that happen. And over the years, I've talked to people in Silicon Valley, and it's pretty well known. In fact, there's been research on humans affecting computers and other devices, sponsored by the government years ago.
Nice.
Right. Wow.
See,
that is good stuff.
Yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, you
can
feel it. And you don't have to be psychic to feel it. You can feel when somebody's energy is off.
It is because we're psychic that we feel that. Honestly, you know, it's because we're all a little psychic.
Yeah,
I believe that. Absolutely. I was just the other day, I was getting email after email, and my day was already horrific at work because I'm a delivery driver for a hospital. And it was just my day had already been horrible. And I keep my phone plugged in so it's always charged, you know, while I'm driving, because I also use the GPS. I'm just scrolling and scrolling. I'm trying to send the email back. I can't get the words right. Nothing. And just the phone just shut off and fell out of my hand. And I'm like, fully charged. It literally just shut itself off and fell out of my hand. It was like my psyche telling me I needed to just stop.
Yeah.
And it turned the phone off. I dropped the phone. Yeah, I had to stop.
No, he doesn't, Becca.
So
yeah, definitely
walk around the block.
Yeah.
Couple of deep breaths.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I learned something from a martial artist. One of the guys actually taught the men who stare at goats, in fact. And he taught me to gather my anger like a ball in my hand, just put it there, and then be on a ground floor and throw it into the ground. And it works.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all the alternative is turning to the Hulk. So
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I already have enough problems in my house. I don't need to be.
What happens if I throw my cigarette?
Don't throw it anywhere else. Oh my gosh!
Don't throw it at somebody for sure. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Or you could if you don't like somebody. So.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for your time, Heisenberg. Sure. You had a question?
Yes. Is there anything you would like to let the world know that you're going on right now?
Well, we have new courses starting that'll be posted on the Rhine Education website, which is just simply Rhine, RHINE.edu.org. They'll be posted, I think, at the end of the month. I'll be teaching a course on the science of ESP and a short course on the development of investigative techniques, kind of the evolution of how investigations have developed over time. There'll be a lot of other courses being offered by the Rhine as well.
Are these all online?
These are all online, absolutely,
Okay.
and you can attend live, or you can watch the recording the next day.
Nice.
You can interact in a lot of different ways. They're pretty reasonably priced too. They're 8-week classes or 4-week classes, and then my website is simply LOYDAUERBACH.com. And there's I haven't started posting some content blogs yet, but I'll be doing that starting this weekend.
Well, I noticed you've been doing some live Q&As as well.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I do a live Q&A every other week. I'll be skipping 1 week in May, but it's the next one's coming up is March 30th. It's on my YouTube channel, which is simply youtube.com/@AskProfessorParanormal.
Nice.
Awesome.
All the other ones, the past ones have been recorded, so you can go ahead and watch them. But it is a live Q&A.
I definitely suggest it. Everybody check it out. It's an interesting time. I'm always learning. Always learning. We can't be in this field if we're not always learning.
We should always be learning. Yeah.
Yes, right. Exactly. So thank you so much, sir, for being on. It was an honor, a pleasure for me, because I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time. I feel like we've only touched the surface, so maybe, when things slow down again for you, maybe we could have you back on and see what's going on.
And by the way, I just want to correct it. It's not Rhine.edu. It's just RhineEDU.org.
So okay, perfect.
RhineEDU.org. Got it.
Yep.
But it's spelled right. RHINE.
That's correct. And if you just go to Rhine.org, you can also do that. And that's the main site for the Rhine Research Center, which is in its 90th anniversary this year.
Awesome.
A lot of stuff happening through the Rhine, and you can also click on education there and get to the site for that way.
Okay.
Excellent. And really quick before, I promised our friends Amber and Justin, they started a t-shirt company called Parawear. They sent me this awesome shirt, the Deuces Peace Out Alien shirt, and I got a couple more that I ordered myself. So Parawear.shop. Check them out on Facebook. You can get all their newest updates on new designs. So I love those two. I love their work, and check them out for sure. So thank you again so much.
Sure.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Tim will share the links on our page.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll make sure when I repost it, and I'll make sure I attach it to everything. So awesome. Thank you again. Denise, you want to take us out with the big one?
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole. Love each other. We love you guys. We'll check you later. Have a good weekend, everybody.